Hi everyone. Welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio Lunchtime Talk. These talks are live every Friday at 1 p.m, both here in the building and online. So whether you're in Bristol or far away, you're very welcome. My name is Alice. I am a white woman in my 30s with brown hair. I'm the editor of Container magazine, an online magazine about creative technology. Container is a joint project between the Pervasive Media Studio and UWE's Creative Economies Lab, and it's supported by two really exciting research and development programs, Bristol and Bath Creative R&D and My World. Container is a magazine. We publish podcasts and videos and articles all about how people are using technology for art and for creativity, community building and social justice. So if that is up your street or sounds up your street, please do check us out. And this lunchtime talk is the first lunchtime talk that is programmed by Container. So we are really excited to be here and really excited to introduce this first one. So I'm going to say a little bit more about the Pervasive Media Studio. Bear with me if you've heard this before. A really warm welcome to anyone who is new here or hasn't visited the studio before. If you don't know about the PM Studio, we are a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology with everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. We're a home for embryonic ideas, research and development, and the building of new companies. And we're a meeting place for both creative and commercial industries. We offer studio space, so that's desk space, meeting rooms, events, opportunities for our residents. And we are a space for people to take risks in their practice and make time for collaboration. The PM Studio lunchtime talks are part of the Open Studio Friday offer. So that means that every Friday, the PM Studio throws open its doors and gives you the chance to spend time here. So you can hot desk from here every Friday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Okay, so quick bit of housekeeping. Feel free to move around, feel free to go and make a cup of tea or get some water or go to the loo. We have a quiet space just to the left of here for anyone that wants a break at any point. Fire exits are at either end of the studio, and one of the studio team will direct you to them should we need to use them, which we don't anticipate. Accessible toilets and baby change can be found in the corridor just next to the kitchen there. A captioned version of this talk will be available on the same link after the talk is finished. And there is a Q&A at the end of the talk. So for those of you watching online, pop your questions into the YouTube chat or tweet us at PM Studio UK. And if you're in the building, just raise your hand and we'll come to you with a mic. So today's talk is from Brian Gibson. He is a Container resident artist, and he'll be sharing a little bit more about his practice, taking apart and reconstructing obsolete domestic technology, using assemblage, print, photography to explore the physicality of tech, and to question and interrogate our relationship with it, to ask, are we passive users or where can we find agency? So over to Brian.
Hi, everyone. For the audio description, I'm a white male, 60 plus, with short white hair, I think. Anyway, that's me. So I'll go back. I took this photograph in September last year. So it was during one of the lockdowns. I'd been working remotely with art charity called Outside In, exploring patient artwork up in Scotland, which was looking at Scotland's first art therapist collection of artworks called Joyce Lang, whose work has been currently archived in Glasgow. A lot of the work that we were looking at involved kind of people who were working in big psychiatric hospitals, and those were being closed down, and the artwork was just being thrown into skips. And it was in danger of being destroyed. and there was no history about this artwork, and it was amazing artwork, and it was people who were making artwork with just what they had at hand. So it would be like penciled paper or a nail and a piece of stone and a piece of glass to cut things. But the artwork was extraordinary, so that's why the collection is called the Extraordinary Art Collection. So this is all going on in the background. There's the lockdown. Everybody's at home, and I'm kind of just thinking, well, I don't need to keep buying art materials. I'll just start working with what's around the house. And I've got a residency at the studio in Bath, which is, a hub for technical innovation and creative industries. And so I kind of just thought, well, I'll start working with technology in a different way with what's at hand. So I just got like an Xbox that we had and just started taking it apart, and it was like a kind of going into some kind of forbidden territory that you're not supposed to go into. So that was, I think, September the 8th, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I started taking it apart. So when I took it apart, this is kind of what was looking inside. So, I've got my phone camera, and I'm just looking in, and it already it looks just like a cityscape. And so so I'm kind of just got my camera and I'm moving it around it. And then on my phone, I've got different phone filters. So some of them I've paid for, some of them are free. And I'm kind of quite interested in the way of things which are kind of in between the art world and not art. And the kind of thing about, it's not really art if you use your phone apps, and it's not really art if you use a free one. So I started just going around with my phone camera around the Xbox. And these are some of the images I've taken. So some of them are just got like a sunlight filter, sepia, a bit of out of focus there. And they're all of the same Xbox, but they're just kind of different angles. But already it's kind of creating like a metropolis in a way. Yeah, so that's that. And then, because I could have always gone down that route of always kind of just making everything look like a sci-fi movie. So what I started doing was I thought, well, I want to kind of just get away from working on the screen, kind of thing. And then I just got, this is a disk drive there, and I just started playing with that, actually physically making things from the Xbox. And this is an old mini disc that I had around the house, and I just took it apart, and there's a couple of screws from the Xbox, and just simply put it together and then just worked through it with different filters. So I was kind of creating different objects like this. So I've created a different range of them and things like that, and it's just added a few colors. You can see like how that's a CD disk drive there, but it's a kind of gateway into something else. Got interested in AR, and I kind of looking at kind of how you could envisage that. I live in Bath, and so first of all I was doing like what would I do with try and create like a motherboard of a mobile phone, and then create it as like an AR skate park. So you could actually kind of somehow integrate that into a skate park, and a different way of engaging with technology. So you're actually, you're not learning code or anything like that. So if you're not interested in code or design and things like that, how do you get involved with technology beyond being a passive user? In a way, kind of, if you're moving around stuff, you kind of notice the internal architecture of things. And this is like an aerial view of Bath, and then I've just put a circuit board layered on top of it, and then just that whole idea of like you'd walk through like a city with maybe your Google glasses on and see like a Google world view and an Apple world view and things like that. So that's kind of trying to imagine that. But again, this is more screen stuff. I started getting involved in things like Twin Motion software, different software like that. And I was on a course, and what I thought was interesting was that everybody was importing things which were like cars and buildings and very kind of sleek things. And I kind of wanted to get away from that. So what I did was just get a piece of A4 paper, sort of crumpled it up, put some ink on it, tied some string around it just to keep it as a space and that. And then I imported it into Twinmotion and scaled it up. And it was just something about whether, learn all this technology, but does the software influence the narrative of what you put into it? So there's always this thing about, am I going to put these cars into it or these buildings and things like that? So how much influence does the technology itself define what you put into it? Once again, I wanted to stop working on the screen, being at the screen all day. So I wanted to sort of work in a more tactile way. So the next thing I started doing was, I'd already taken the Xbox apart, and then somebody at the studio in Bath, Dave Webb, sort of gave me his like an old laptop which wasn't working. And so what I did was this. So I took the laptop apart, and I started using the screen thing as an ink plate. So I was using that, and then I decided, inked up the keyboard. And that's the result. So I started doing these monoprints. And in the black bit is the laptop when it's opened up, the internal side of the laptop. So I produced quite a few different series of these in different colors. And it was working with the different layers of the laptop. Yeah. So then I just started working just in black and white. So that's to the right, you can see the keyboard on the bottom, and that's the back end of the laptop there. And then I started using a mobile phone. I had like several old mobile phones, just taking them apart. And I thought what was interesting was somebody kind of said that, oh, well, that's just like a Neolithic sort of architectural sort of aerial view of some Neolithic site. And I thought, yeah, well, that's kind of that's like it's like a neoliberal sort of architecture now, but it's like all compact into like a tiny phone now. That the world that we live in is all kind of inside here. Okay. And then I started again. These were like monoprints. Then I started using the monoprints, but filtering them back through different phone apps again. So I'm kind of quite interested in going between analog and digital, and then switching back and forth. So I started making these prints here. So you can see, if I go back to this laptop, you can see areas where the keys are, the speaker, and I've kind of just moved them around a bit. And there's the internal workings of the keyboard down there. And I've just swapped a few of the colors around with different filters. And again, they create like a different landscape and that. So these are the close-ups of them. So for me, it's like a very creative way of looking at technology and creating works that make me happy. I enjoy doing it. This one, I started doing assemblages of materials. So this one's titled, "Just what is it that makes today's technology so different, so appealing?" So that's like from a, named after Richard Hamilton collage, 1956 pop art collage, which is the sort of, just what is it that makes today's homes so different and appealing? But really, the internal architecture of, domestic tech is kind of like what our homes, they are our homes now in a way. So I put together this assemblage, and it's done as a cyanotype photograph, which is a very early type of photography from 1843 onwards. So really sort of at the beginning of the technological process of photography. So I wanted to use that thing about, technology is always seen as being kind of like very now, but I wanted to sort of use something that was very now then, and so I did that, a positive one and a negative image of that. So I'm showing these up in Glasgow next month, I think, in Projectability. There's a really good gallery up there. Again, kind of just another assemblage, but this time I've made it into like a flat image for screen prints. So again, I'm producing these different landscapes. I've actually, this one's a combination of an assemblage of parts from like an Xbox. You can just see like a heat sink there and the gridding there and a little pipe there and some ICs there. But also I kind of used some photographs of buildings as well. So I became interested in not only the architecture of the design of tech, but like when you go outside, that they kind of correspond with each other places. And so most of these are like an image of the newspaper that I've printed off, aren't they? Which are at the back there. I'll explain a bit more about that later. These are some of the examples of some of the assemblages I've done. So you can just see the screen there, the back of a laptop there, parts of an Xbox there. And I'm just creating these different environments, and I'm just playing with them. And these are again, that's just like the side of a laptop photographing through the inside of it. And this one is like an airport lounge, and again, another assemblage. So what I'm thinking about now is developing some kind of narrative storyline, storyboard, and perhaps sort of developing it like that, really. So it's going in a lot, for me, my artwork's going in a lot of different directions. And, I've ended up producing this newspaper, which I wanted to do, a broadsheet newspaper, which is a very tactile thing and a sort of like ephemeral thing, which you can just, that's it. That's my presentation over with.
Oh, thank you so much, Brian.
All right.
That was great. This is the newspaper. There's copies at the back. Take one. So we're going to have a little Q&A now. So you can pop your questions in the chat if you are watching online, or you can put your hands up if you are here in real life. So if you have a question, please put your hand up. And I think Jade will come around with the mic. Is that right? So maybe we should start off and talk a little bit about the broadsheet.
Yeah.
About why you like working in that medium, or why you chose newspaper and why you chose broadsheet.
Yeah, well, when I started off a couple of years ago, I started a magazine up, a print publication called Deviation Street, which was like a music and arts independent magazine that set up, and we went from doing a 32-page, full-color, perfect bound magazine. There's a couple on the back there, if anybody wants to have a look at it, to just producing a broadsheet newspaper because it was cheaper and easier to do. So it was cost-wise when we started working with the broadsheet, but then I really, really enjoyed the whole thing about just the physical thing about picking up a newspaper, and it's not like a tabloid. It's a bit bigger. You've got to you can read the print. It's just a very nice, pleasant experience rather than kind of just looking on the screen all the time. So that's why, and when I got the container residency, he was asking me how I wanted to present the work. And I thought, well, it would be another great opportunity to show the work of technology in a kind of in a process which is, it's still like a digital process now that it's made, and it's printed, technological process. But also it kind of just seems like a very kind of, everything's online, but it's kind of quite nice to actually have a physical record of what I've made, rather than, and it's not a gallery. You don't have to go to a gallery. You don't have to go online. So there's a lot of people who do things which isn't online.
Yeah, sure. I love that about your talk, like the layers of experience, like what the experience is different with a newspaper than online, what you experience things on the ground rather than that kind of zoomed out thing. So when you're like looking at the architecture of technology up close, what that does, you're putting like things that aren't meant to be there, things that aren't smooth, like the bundle of paper, putting that in. I thought that was like really interesting layers of experience.
And it's like me seeing the technology the way I see it, rather than it being imposed on. It's sort of like saying, this is the architecture and this is what it does, and this is the only way that you can look at technology. It's kind of going like, oh, I'm looking at it in a different way.
Yeah.
Or I'm looking at the way that makes sense to me, or the ways that I can make sense of it.
Sure. Yeah. Anyone any questions?
So someone asks, have you learned anything about the technology that you use?
Hopefully, right?
All right. I've learned a little bit about how to use twin motion and photogrammetry and things like that. Coding-wise, no. But AI a little bit. I've been reading a bit more about AI. So not really into, just nothing beyond what I've already used on things like Photoshop. Well, I already know about Photoshop and things like that, but not the sort of programming. Things like that. It's just not my thing.
And we have a question from Joe at the back, maybe first, and then we'll come to you.
Hi. Thank you, Brian. I really love the images that you showed us. I sort of slightly hesitate to ask this because I think it's kind of there in the work, but as you are giving a talk, I will do. What do you think that the images kind of reveal about our relationship to technology? Is there anything that you think that you were just talking just now about taking a really close-up look at the internal architecture, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about, for you, what that kind of reveals.
Well, I think it reveals my lack of understanding about what goes on. So I was just saying earlier, if I had a magnifying glass and a piece of A4 paper, I could show you how a camera works just by the image coming through there, the light, and the image being projected upside down here. I have no idea how a phone camera works. Even when I take a phone apart, I know it's got a lens, but beyond that, I've got no idea about how, the circuitry of it or anything like that. So if anything, it's revealed all the things that I don't know about technology. And in some way, I kind of get some kind of little interest in that. Yeah.
I think that's quite an important thing to reveal, so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a good starting point, really.
Thank you.
I think Caleb had a question. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, who was next?
Caleb.
Hi. Firstly, I just want to say that it's really interesting that you mentioned that you didn't really know about these technologies, but you have such an interest to play with them, which I think is really nice as an artist. But what I was wondering is what were you doing before this whole thing started? Because you mentioned that it kind of emerged from the pandemic. Were you playing with these kind of things before you started that, or do you think it was because of the pandemic you managed to make this project?
The workshops that I was part of, so we're co-facilitating these workshops with people online, and because we're doing a series of exploring this art collection, which was up in Scotland, of patients' artwork, a lot of the workshops involved were kind of doing creative workshops. They involved using just pen and paper, pencil and paper. So we were just literally, because everybody was working from home. So we were doing creative workshops just using pencils and paper and trying to keep it as simple as possible. So we'd, like say, 10 sessions over that, over the workshop. And so we'd have to come up with like 10 different ways of being creative with pencils and papers and scissors and strings and things like that. And kind of like whilst exploring these artworks. So that idea of just working with what's at hand was important to me. And then I kind of just thought, I'm using technology every day. I've got all this stuff which is in the house which is obsolete. Why don't I just...
And are you going to continue with doing things like that with the technology-based subject?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of it about, isn't there? There's a lot of obsolete technology about to work with. So I think it's just a great, people use paint or whatever, it's just like a great medium to work with, because so if anybody's got any old tech they don't want, I'll take it off them, the work will just get bigger and, I don't know, where it will go. It might just get bigger and bigger. It's, I mean, yeah.
Cool.
Thank you. Aaron.
I totally love those images, Brian. They're so beautiful. Really, really amazing. It's quite interesting, the sort of black and white series as opposed to the colours. And I just wondered why you chose certain colours, or was there a preference with the tech you were using, or anything like that? Any connection, basically, to the colours and the tech you were using?
I think at first it was just a case of just having a few inks and working with what I had, really. So it wasn't a case of going, oh, I've got to buy some silver paint or anything like that. It was just literally what was, I had around the house. I've started doing things like, like brass ribbons of phones now with crayons and things like that. Different, just crayons, just everything that's around the house, really. So that kind of started it off. But I've also got like kind of, so the first thing I did was kind of red ink on white paper, but then I've kind of just started doing white paint on black paper, on green paper, just different combinations now. So I'm doing different series and different colored paper now, and just working out which papers work, which are the best papers to use. Can't be too thick, can't be too thin, otherwise, it gets holes in it. Yeah, so it's just a whole process of working out what works and what doesn't as a process.
Yeah, because a lot of technology is quite black and white, isn't it? Apart from, dare I say it?
Yeah, it doesn't have to have a function, you know what I mean? It is what, I make it, and it doesn't have to it doesn't have to work. It doesn't, it just evolves.
No.
Thank you. Do you want to just...
Thanks. Yeah, also about the images, I don't know if this is like a question or something, just musing. I noticed that there's like, when these technologies are like personal technologies like phones, laptops, these kind of things, and then the images are depicting quite personal spaces like kitchens, or even an airport is like a place where people are interacting.
Yeah.
And I sort of wondering if there is any technology that you might be able to go into and like look at, so at that depth, that depicts, I don't know, like rural design or open design, or like even the countryside. Like I don't know, but got me thinking about that.
Well, that's like the picture, the twin motion thing, where I put the piece of paper in there. So everybody was like, on the poster, everybody was putting something modern in.
Right.
And or kind of these perfect trees, and even the grunge filter is perfect. And then kind of think, well, what happens if you put things which aren't perfect in, like bits of crumpled paper? Or,
Yeah, I really like that one as well.
Yeah. So on that level, I could do that. But again, it's just like, what technology do you have to do those things? Not everybody has those technologies, and then I kind of so then I want to keep going back to what is simple, what what you can physically work with. I used to work with deaf adults with additional needs, developing workshops. So it's very much about kind of like a lot of tactile work, and a lot of kind of just making things kind of easy to understand, but you still can produce amazing artwork. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm going with it.
So you do a lot of work with a charity called Outside In.
I do,
So maybe
yeah.
you could tell us a little bit about that.
So I've been with Outside In, which is an arts charity for people who face barriers in the art world. So it could be, for whatever reason, you know, it could be trauma, it could be mental health issues, it could be social circumstances, whatever reasons that people feel obliged, that feel as though they're facing barriers within the art world, they can sort of submit artwork to the online gallery and things like that. So I've been with them for about, just over 10 years now, and you know, we've explored like the works of different, outside artists, so that kind of thing. So
do you find are a lot of people working in technology or working with technology?
what, outside of?
Like, are there other artists that you draw inspiration from, or that you encounter through Outside In that are also like playing with technology?
I mean, there's one guy who was doing some amazing. We were exploring the work of a woman who was found wandering around Scotland just during the wars, who was a war refugee, and she was put into a psychiatric hospital. When she was in spent the rest of her life in a psychiatric hospital. When she was there, though, she used to do a lot of embroidery, and we kind of worked out, because she was doing these architectural drawings as well, and she would do drawings of kind of like with curved walls and that. So they were very kind of influenced by Steiner, and you kind of just think, that's really amazing that somebody back then would have known about Steiner and doing all these like just colored pencil drawings and things like that. She did a lot of embroidery work, but one of the people who was exploring the course was doing things like making random walkers with programming random walkers, where you kind of just goes one way, then the other, then the other. So what happened with Grant, was that he decided to start doing embroidery. So the process went the other way. So he started getting into embroidery, the whole kind of thing about the computer program would do like the random walker, but then he started doing it as embroidery. So he became physically engaged with what he was doing, rather than it just being a keyboard and a screen. I thought that was him.
Yeah. Any other questions? Martin?
I really love this stuff. So you've got a lot of what you're working with is like these internal, hidden, almost private parts of. Not private parts. the private components of these technologies, and then you seem to really like to juxtapose those with these like public architectural spaces, like the airport and the city and so on. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about that sort of public-private tension that seems to be in the work.
Well, I guess the thing about me doing this is that it's those devices and things like that, they're very public things, but they've got like a lot of private information on in a way. So I'm kind of, but the artwork I'm doing, and if anybody else is doing this kind of art, if I was doing a workshop on it, and just had like a load of stuff, and people were taking it apart and printing on it and doing whatever they wanted to do with it, it becomes a very private thing then, doesn't it? It's not dictated to by whatever app you use and things like that. And it doesn't have to be, you don't need a power supply or anything like that. As for like the sort of public and private spaces, I'm not too sure at the minute. I'm still kind of, kind of going through different things. I think when I did the thing about just what is it that makes today's technology so interesting, that was a thing where I kind of thought, well, that's, the whole sort of like Richard Hamilton's pop art picture, and that thing about, that was like the age of modernism, and kind of, everybody was like looking forward to the bright new future, things like that, and technology is a bit like that. and kind of that whole thing about, oh, we just need to upgrade a bit more, and life will be better. And I don't know. That's,
yeah. I always think of airports as like really liminal spaces as
Yeah,
well,
that's
that you're
right,
like passing through. And then, it's like the public and private as well. Like, you're not really meant to look under the hood, are you? So it's like quite a private space in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really included people in the artwork yet. So I'm kind of talking with someone called Kevin Fitchett, who's an artist I know. We're talking maybe like collaborating together to make some big panels, and he likes doing figurative drawings, so maybe kind of, that'll lead to something else really about putting figures in it. And again, it's a different way, I could be doing this kind of thing digitally, and then I'm actually drawn into the pictures again. So it's kind of that whole toggle between going between digital analog, and yeah.
Anyone else like to ask a question?
I'll just see if I can explain what's in my head. It might come out in a muddle, so just bear with me. I'm interested in coding. Nobody who doesn't do, I don't do coding. I have no idea what all of those numbers and squiggles mean, basically, and whatever things that you have to use to make something blip across the screen. I just wondered if we followed, as humans, followed the sort of computer code. Is there a code for us to sort of move across? I'm going to get lost in this in a minute, so bear with me. Say, for example, 5769 was for me to blink my eye or something. I just wonder if there's something that could be played with in that zone.
All right, yeah.
Does that make sense to anybody at all? Great.
So it's like going back to some sort of binary code that does something.
Yeah, but like a code, not of behaviour, of sort of actions or something that a human can follow. So you, like a language, but in a coding way.
Yeah.
I'd have to draw it. I really can't. Yeah.
Well, you could do that. You could do like a movement thing, couldn't you? Like a random walker, like a dance thing. You could do like a, like one step forward, one to the left, one to the right, and things like that.
Yes,
but
when like if it was written in front of you and it would say 5679 and you would blink. It's like a reaction to it or something, or I don't know. And that's what coding does, doesn't it? It's like a load of numbers and then things happen. So
yeah.
It's like I'm going to lose my job in a minute.
No, I mean, I'd be really interested in working with other, now that, because I started all this last September, so I'd be really interested in working with other people who know the kind of, I'm not against coding, obviously, but, it's just because it's not my thing, but I'd be really interested in working with people who are knowledgeable in those areas,
Yeah, Dave Webb's certainly a man.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Sure.
Anyone else?
Hello. Hello. I was just looking at the previous shot that looked like the airline.
Oh, yeah.
The airport room, and you said at the time that you were thinking there might be like a narrative later on, that you were going in that direction.
Yeah.
And I was quite curious to know whether it would be like sequential prints, or whether, I mean, you've mentioned about putting people maybe. I wasn't sure if they'd be put in the scenes, or whether you're going to move out of the environment that you've created and make something entirely different. In a narrative way. You just mentioned the word narrative, and I was quite curious to know how you were going to maybe proceed with that.
I think that's why I wanted to collaborate with somebody on doing that, because it's a kind of process about, I'll forward Kev the images, and then he'll kind of go like, oh, right, we could do this with it. And I go, oh, all right then. but then kind of it'd be really good to sort of see how that develops. So there's then, you know,
So
whether
not text exactly, but
not text.
you wouldn't use text as a narrative or anything, but
Possibly. I mean, I wouldn't sort of rule anything out, but you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
it's yeah. I think it's about kind of like having no definite, but maybe it's like a deadline date, but you know, kind of, you know, whatever happens in between that now and the deadline date is kind of how the work evolves, really, and
Yeah.
that's what you get.
exciting.
So.
So what next, do you think? What are your plans for the future, or what would you like to see happen?
Well, that kind of thing about developing kind of some kind of storyboard narrative, possibly taking it further. So it might be like an Alphaville, like a spy thing, you know, like where somebody's going into the tech world or something like that. So, you know, that could happen. I'm still very interested in the cyanotypes using sort of like old photographic processes. So, you know, like looking at plants as well. There's the whole thing about sort of slime mold and technology and how that works. And I don't know whether algae works with like that way as well. So I'm kind of quite.
Does everyone know what slime mold is?
Slime mold?
Yeah.
So I don't know, does anybody else know? So there's a thing like where you can kind of, the connectivity of like fungal sort of connections and things like that, where you can actually...
Oh, cool, like communicate, yeah.
Yeah, so slime mold will find the quickest route from kind of like A to B and that, and so they can use it to connect up, things like that. And, you know, there's a possibility, I think they've discovered that you can use algae as like a battery source now to run a phone off it and things like that.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of quite interested in the way that you could kind of use natural products and things like that.
Yeah,
and again,
yeah.
like, you know, with like, you know, you can use plant-based sort of stuff to make photographs and things like that. So
yeah, bringing the natural world in.
yeah.
Great.
Different possibilities. So there's about 2 or 3 things all you know, I've got like different things simmering away.
You can tell there's a lot of different
Yeah.
ideas and directions you want to go in. Yeah.
See what happens.
Great. Any last questions? Cool. Well, thank you so much, Brian. That was great. It was great to hear more.
And if anybody wants a paper, it's down at the back there. You might as well pass that around. And
Yes, please do take one. And thanks for joining us today. Next week's talk will be by Roy Kareem, who will discuss the science of what being outdoors brings to our mental health and creativity, the stories and work that emanate from such experiences, and how we can bring more of it all into our lives. Not used to reading off a script, as you might be able to tell. I also wanted to mention one last thing. There is a very cool funding call that is either just announced or about to be announced. It is announced. So it's the Playable City Sandbox. Is now open for applications. So Watershed will award 6 teams up to £45,000 to develop a playable city prototype that will reanimate our cities post-lockdown by inviting people to play and connect. So if you want to find out more about that, you can head to the Watershed Opportunities page and read all about the theme and how to apply, or keep an eye on Watershed's Twitter, and there'll be more information there as well. And if you want to stick around today, you can stick around on Hot Desk, find out more about what we do. Feel free to talk to any of us or the team. Next page, sorry. If you're watching online, you can contact studio@watershed.co.uk with any questions. So thank you all for being here, and see you same time, same place next week. Thank you.